Okay, guys, y'all tell me everything y'all know about soldering. What is soldering?
Soldering is where you're melting valuable metals down between tin and lead. Make sure
Well, the act of soldering is bonding a metals together with a third metal that we call solder, right? Makes sense. And so there's a video, but we'll look at it. I'm gonna break it this way. I couldn't find it, but that's okay. That's what I was looking for. I'll get it in a minute. Is it up there? Video that we have with EIA with the electronic industry. We have 3 metals that we use in our solder. Now this is electronic solder. Electronic solder has lead in it, right? You understand that? And what's the problem with lead? It's what do they call it? It's one of those things that kills brain cells. Is it dangerous to handle solder? No. Is it dangerous if you ingest it? The molecules of lead are not big enough to absorb through your skin. So all you got to do is just make sure you don't have any cuts or anything on your hands. And handling solder, you're not going to have any problem. But handling it and then doing like this or cooking boogers or something like that, that's not good, right? Okay, or trying to eat or drink around soldering. So you're handling solder and you reach them, grab your drink bottle, right? You understand that? So that and washing your hands is very, very important when you get through soldering. Not using this stuff right there, that disinfectant, because all you're doing when you do that is you're killing germs. You're not killing solder, right? So it's very, very important every time that you solder that you do what? You get through, what's the first thing you need to do? Go wash your hands. If you got any cuts on your fingers or abrasions, you can wear surgical gloves, or you can wear band-aids, but make sure you cover any abrasions you got and keep your dang fingers out of your mouth and out of your nose, right? So alloy, what's an alloy? 2 or more metals, yeah. You gotta have at least 2 to make an alloy. The act of soldering, we can talk about that. We're gonna look at something called eutectic. Then we're gonna look at the tin-lead ratio, also silver. We're gonna talk about wedge and flux, penny, and of course both y'all know what slag is. What is slag?
impurity.
Impurities that rise to the surface of any molten metal, right? This is a chart that shows ratios of tin and lead. So tin has a lower melting temperature than lead. And what this does is tells us when the temperature that metal is in solid form, and then when it goes into the plastic form, basically it acts like clay. So like steel, it really amazed me. They knew exactly when that would go into a plastic state. And while it was in a plastic state, what could they do with it? They could form it. They could do it in any form they wanted to put it in, you know. They could take a big chunk of solid metal and ram a rod down the center and end up with a seamless pipe if they get it into what state? The plastic state. Then after a certain temperature, then the metal will turn into a liquid.
Melting point line?
Yeah, we call that the melting temperature, which for steel, like what, 2,400 degrees or 2,200 degrees. So lead has a melting temperature of 642 degrees Fahrenheit. Tin has a melting temperature of 450 degrees. Now what happens when we start combining this when we start combining these two metals, we change the melting temperature of the alloy. So automatically the temperature starts dropping down. All right, you understand that? And then we hit this magic temperature, 361 degrees centigrade. I'm sorry. Okay. So what happens at 361 degrees? It has no plastic state. That means when it gets above 361 degrees, it turns into a liquid. When it gets below 361 degrees, it turns into a solid. Which is a ratio of 63:37. 63%. 63%, they have 37%. 63:37. This is what we refer to as eutectic. So eutectic is a temperature where an alloy has no plastic state. And for lead and tin, it's 63:37. So this is what they call eutectic solder. Normally, this is not the ratio we use for some reason, and don't ask me why. Our most popular is 60/40. It has a slight plastic point going between the wire. So the solder we have here is 60/40. Are you okay? That make sense? Not much to it. But eutectic solder would be 63:37. You do have people that like that stuff too. So ours is not a plastic state very long. Now the problem is, when we combine two metals together, even when you weld, you have to make special consideration of impurities and surface oxidation and all that other kind of stuff. So what we do is we come up with some type of corrosive that basically is in there to remove or help remove surface oxidation or surface impurities, where we try to make these metals bond together. And that's what we need to do, is we need to make these metals bond together, right? What we use in solder is we use something called flux, which is something that is pretty corrosive. We have two types of fluxes that we use. We use acid flux and we use rosin flux. Now, what's the problem with acid in electronics? Well, acid is a conductor. That's why we put acid in. That's one of the reasons we put acid in our car batteries, right? Okay. And then an acid is always an acid. What we want to do is we want to come up with something that's a good insulator, and we want to go something that only becomes active when it's hot. So we use rosin, which is basically pine rosin. That's basically what it is. So pine rosin, I don't know if you ever been climbing in a pine tree. We used to do it all the time. Pine trees burn real good. Pine rosin burns real good. So we can buy big tubs or tubes worth of rosin that we would come in and we would apply it to our surfaces. What they found out a long time ago, even my welder, I don't use rosin because the rosin is in the core of the wire. So the center of the wire is actually hollow. And then what they do is in the center of the wire, they actually put the plug. This is probably the most popular. I've never seen it before. I just use the high-heat wire. So what happens is the flux has a lower melting temperature than the solder. So as soon as your iron hits that flux comes spilling out of the center of that solder and covers what you're fixing to solder. And then it's highly corrosive when it's hot. But as soon as it goes down, it becomes inert, and it's non-conductive. It makes a good insulator. The only problem we have is that it's a little bit sticky. So what would happen if you didn't clean it off? Any garbage that would get on your board, it would just clean there, but it wouldn't hurt.
So once you lift this off down.
Oh yeah. Solder is a unique metal in that it keeps the same alloy ratio. So we can melt and unmelt solder. So if I don't get a good solder joint, I can just take my iron and go down there and reheat it. So there's really no excuse not having a good solder, what we call a solder joint. So it's not like plastics. You know, plastics, once you form them and then you come back and reheat them, they become brittle. They actually change their characteristics. You ever did that? So anybody that's in plastics, like Thomas, is when you remelt scrap plastic, you always mix it with what? New plastic. You know, that way you can compensate for it. But yeah, solder is really neat in that we can heat it up and cool it down. The flux, though, normally what we do is we have a chemical that we call flux remover. That once we solder, we spray that on the circuit card to remove that flux. The flux itself is non-damaging, it's not corrosive, but it's what? It's sticky. And what that means is any contaminants or anything that comes around the board, it has a tendency to do what? To cling to that solder. So different types of solder. We have what we call soldered iron. They're categorized as using pencils and guns, right? You see why these are called pencils, because they look like a lot. Pair of pencils and a solid gun looks like a gun. What's the advantage of a soldering gun? Well, a soldering gun is usually a lot hotter, creates a lot more watts than a soldering iron or a soldering pencil. Are we okay? These things have a insulated handle on them. Usually they have a grip that lets you know when you get close to this thing. You never want to grab it on this side right here. Right? We okay? 360 something. Huh? Use the stand. Don't lay these things out. I got so embarrassed one time. I was out working on a scale. And it had a small weighbridge. And we came up and we picked the weighbridge over, and I had to replace a load cell. I had to solder it. And guess what I did with my solder iron? I just laid it down on the floor there. And the guy that was helping me worked for the company. And he lost his balance and put his hand right down on top of my soldering iron. Oh man, I felt so bad about that. Then we had a guy who was working on the TV and had his soldering iron was all wrapped inside that thing like this, and dropped his soldering iron on his arm and just trying to get out of there. Yeah. And for a while, polyester was real popular with guys. You ever see that? And you know, these are suits, but polyester pants, you know, were real popular. You drop that stuff on your polyester pants, it just burns the hole through it. You know. So of course you need to wear safety glasses, right? You understand that. I've seen some people wear gloves, but that's not required. On soldering irons or soldering pencils, we have different tips. What determines what tip you use is usually a preference. I like what they call a steam chisel. And I like to use. I think people have a little crooked variation. And it's basically a matter of preference. How sharp the tip is, what it comes down to, basically, what's the solvent. Okay, so this is not too hard so far, right? Correct sequence for soldering. For one thing, solder is a metal. You're going to bring it up to a melting temperature, which means it's going to create slag. Solder slag is nice and gray. So the first thing you're going to do when you pick up your soldering iron, first of all, is we're going to do something called keening. You Anybody know what tin is? Huh? Tinning is the act of coating something with solder. So what we do, the problem we have with solder is that we're trying to transfer heat and we're trying to get the maximum heat we could possibly get. So if I was to magnify my soldering iron tip, it's going to be jagged like that, right? You understand? And the surfaces I'm soldering are going to be what? Jagged. So that means we would only be transferring heat in those two little points right there. So what do we need? We need something to fill that gap. So what we do is we tin the soldering iron. So what we do is we coat the tip of the iron with solder. So the iron has solder on it. So when you come up here and do that, that solder that's on the iron comes in here and does what? Fills in the gap. And so what you have now is you have maximum heat transfer. So, and it's very, very important. If you go out and buy a new soldering iron, hopefully it's going to be tinned already. If it's not tinned, you got to be really careful on how you tin it, and I'll tell you to do that. So the first thing we're going to do is tin, so it's got solder on it. So when it's in your soldering stand, what's it going to do? It's going to oxidize, right? You understand? And that oxide is not a good transfer of heat. So the first thing we're going to do when we pick up that iron is we're going to do what? We're going to clean it. We got two techniques. We have sponges that you just put water on it. And this is not a synthetic sponge. This has to be a real sponge. If it's a synthetic sponge, what would happen? It melt, right? Okay, you understand that? So first thing we're going to do is we're going to take our soldering iron out. It's going to be in a stand. First thing we're going to do is what? We're going to clean it off. Second thing we're going to do, which they don't show here, is we're going to do we're going to re-tin the iron. So you just take your solder and put some solder on your iron, right? You understand? Everybody okay? Then what you're going to do is you're going to place the soldering iron and you're going to make sure it touches both the metals that you're trying to heat up. So notice where they have the soldering iron. They have it at the junction between this terminal and the wire we're trying to solder together. Because what you're trying to do is you're trying to heat up the junction that you're going to solder. A lot of people think that the solder iron does the soldering. That's false. The soldering iron provides the heat. The metals do the soldering. Y'all understand that? So notice what we do. Here, the soldering iron is on this side, and where are they applying the solder? On the other side. So we solder on opposite of the side that we put our iron. If the solder don't melt, it means that the metals are not hot enough to melt the solder. Y'all understand that? Now sometimes we don't get a good transfer, so what we'll do is we'll place the solder right here, touch it to get a good transfer, and then we always end up soldering on the opposite side. Everybody understand that? What's that? On the other side. Well, it wicks toward the heat is what it does.
Yes.
Okay, everybody okay? Makes sense. If it don't transfer, then just take your solder and touch between the iron and the joint, and then immediately, as soon as the solder starts spilling out, do what? Move over to the opposite side. Always end up soldering on the opposite side. Because if the metals are hot enough to melt the solder, then you'll get a good solder. If the metals are compatible to solder. There are some metals that you cannot solder. Stainless steel you can't solder. Aluminum you can't solder. What's that? No, so what I've got, no, we're not going to flip it over. You have to look at this slide. This is really, really good. So notice where they're putting the soldering at it. Can you see? So they're touching both metals we're trying to solder together. And then look where they have look where they're putting the iron, and then look where they're putting the solder. Can you see what I'm talking about, Barry? Yeah, so if these are my two metals, then I would put, if I put my soldering iron on this side, I would apply the solder to the opposite side. So we don't flip the board over, right? Understand? It makes sense? Huh? Now what we're shooting for is we're shooting for this. So what would happen, now we call this wetting, by the way. It's not wetting the bed. So the term wetting is when the molecules of the solder bonds with the surface molecules of the metals that you are soldering together. Anybody that's done welding understands that. So what you got to do when you weld is you got to make your weld metal bond with the metals you're trying to solder together. If you don't get bonding, then you'll end up with a bubble or something like that, if y'all ever done any welding. I did some welding on my lawnmower deck this weekend. So what we're looking for is we're looking for this volcano shape right here. So this is the metal. Normally we're going to be soldering to what we call a solder eye. And it's got that name because it'll be round, and then it'll have a dot, and then the lead goes through the dot. And then this right here will be made out of copper. Normally it'll be copper, but a lot of times it's copper that's plated with a real thin coating of tin. Now why do they plate it with tin? Copper oxidizes real fast. Copper oxide is a really good insulator, and it don't solder at all. You can't solder on top of copper oxide. So before we solder, we got to get rid of all that oxide. Tin has a very low oxidation rate. It's not as good as gold, but it's real low. Tin, when it oxidizes, it turns black, by the way. So what we need to do is these things won't usually be copper, they'll usually be silver. And why they're silver is because they're copper, but they're plated with a real thin coating of tin, right? To help prevent it from oxidizing. If these things if you look at in the flux does a pretty good job, but it doesn't do, if you got a lot of oxidation, the flux is not going to get that off. So what you need to do is if the pads themselves are oxidized, has oxide on it, which means they got a black tint to them. Or if you can literally see a coating of goop on there, how do you clean those off? Well, you don't use sandpaper. Why don't you use sandpaper? For one thing, you're going to wipe off that little tin plating in a heartbeat, right? You understand that? So we don't sand these things. So what do we clean them with? I don't have one here, but I think I got one next door. Not a scraper. We use not the new erasers, not the big old gummy erasers, but we use those pick erasers, just a pencil eraser. So pencil erasers work great. We used to call them pink pearls. That's the big old, and I got one at home in my toolbox. You know what I'm talking about? Those angled erasers that you used to have when you was a kid. You can still get them. Those guys really work good. So all you do is just erase them. Just use an eraser to clean them off. Works really well. Huh? Yeah, I mean, if you're into drawing, you probably got one for your pencils.
So what kind of coating do they use on the bottom to make the components work?
I don't know what you mean.
You know how it says on the work.
I don't know. I honestly don't know of anything that is waterproof, water resistant. And all of them's not. Some of them you can buy that are, and they're water resistant, they're not waterproof. They just seal them up real good.
So they use the same type of
Oh yeah, they solder the same thing we do. Usually they use what they call silver solder, and we'll talk about that in a little while, but they're stuck components. If you took that away, it's the case that's water resistant, it's not the electronic. So you don't have any holes or anything that goes through there anymore. Everything's done with membranes. You know, OtterBox sells an water resistant box that you can buy for a regular iPhone or any, and they just snap it together real good. The only problem is most of the time on those things you lose your what? You lose your finger scanning capability. Because I've got one at home, I never use it because I can't. Yeah, I can't. It won't scan my finger anymore. Yeah, we got some. Those are our new welding simulators. Hope they might. I don't think they're going to be set up in time for y'all to look at them, but it's getting so costly for a welding program. It's one of the most more costly because it's got so much consumables in that thing. So if you learn how to practice with a simulator, and then before you actually start doing one welding for real, and it'll probably save them a lot of money. So what you're looking for is if you get this bond in, you're looking for this volcano look. Can y'all see that? And what you actually do is you see where the solder merges with this metal, and you see where the solder merges with this metal. You understand? A big tendency is to come up and use too much solder, and they'll end up with a big old blob like that. And what's the problem with that? It might be a perfect solder joint. Well, it still might. The problem is you can't tell. If you can't tell if something's good or bad, then you assume it's bad, right? You understand what we're saying? So if you can't tell it's a good solder joint, then if you don't know, then you don't know. If you can tell it's a good solder joint, then you know it's a good solder joint. Y'all understand the difference? That's the difference between blowing up your tires by feel or using a pressure gauge. So you go out there and your tires are low, and you just grab something and you blow it up till you feel like it's got what? 34 psi. Does it have 34 psi in it? It might, but you what? You don't know. So if we can't tell it's a good solder joint, then we would fail it because we don't know. Right? You understand what we're saying? So if you can't see, we call it a fillet. If you can't see this fillet, and I'm going to demonstrate some to this class after next. Next class is going to be dedicated entirely to what? Next class is going to be what?
Dedicated.
Yeah, meter. So we'll come in, we'll go through the lecture on meter certification. And then I'm going to add an assignment to the assignments. Normally assignments are worth 50 points. This assignment's going to be worth 100 points. And what you'll do is, if you don't attempt the certification, you'll get a what? 0. If you fail it, you're going to get a what? 50. If you pass it, you're going to get a what? 100. And it's hard, guys, it's hard to fail. Believe me. And you can take it, you can go through it, and you're going to have the PowerPoints available while you take the what? The quiz, huh? No, I don't know. That's I'll try to find out. Huh? I don't know. But you shouldn't have any problem because you can go back and forth and you can look things up, and it's not timed as far as I remember. Now you have to score a 70. You have to score a 70 to pass it. Instructors have to score an 80. Huh? I don't know. I can't remember. I took it. Huh? I didn't make 100. No. I made 97. guess, I can't remember. I don't know. I don't remember. I can't remember what was on there. I can't remember. It seemed like it was 60 questions, I think. Yeah, I didn't go back and, I felt like I felt like I did okay, so I didn't go back and check anything. So y'all have to make 70 to get your meter certification, but it'll be a certification, right? You understand that?
Try to more or less pass
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, if you make above 70, you get 100 points. I mean, if you get the certification, you get 100 points. If you fail it. And guys, it's basically an open book test. I mean, so every question on there is on a specific meter. It's on the, so what we're going to do Monday is just familiarize you with the meter. You're actually going to hold the meter in your hands. And we're going to go through doing some measurements and stuff like that. And then you'll get to hold the meter in your hands. Now, you don't have the meter when you're doing the test, but you have access to the PowerPoints, right? You understand that? So if you brought up a split screen, if you got two computers, that's the way to do it. So that way you're not trying to split a screen, you know.
That's what you use first test. Yeah, well,
So anytime you see, so what happens, so a big solder joint, when we're doing a wire like this,
looks like a volcano.
we're trying to do that volcano. And you can't see it on this first one. But if you come up here and this thing actually comes in here and dips down like that, that's a bad solder.
So, okay.
What that means is there's oxide buildup on this conductor. There's impurities in there.
Okay.
If it was a good solder joint, what you'd see is this would actually come up and you could literally see it bond with the metals. You can see it bond. So if you ever see it dip, then that's a bad joint. So if you ever see it come along here on your solder eye and it comes up here and dips in like that, then that means it's what? Bad. Because if it's good, what you're going to see is you're going to see it come up this thing, it's going to fillet out, and it's going to come, and you're actually, in fact, they insinuated a good solder joint is going to look something like that. And you're going to be able to see where the solder, you can see the wedding, you can see where the solder actually bonds with the metals. So when you solder wires together, and I'm going to demonstrate some of these, when you solder wires together, you literally can still see the strands. If you can't see the strands, then it might be a good joint, but you don't know, right? It's just like until you get that tire pressure gauge out and put it on that tire, you don't know. It might be okay, but then again, it might. A cold solder joint would be one of these. A cold solder joint means for some reason you didn't get the metals up hot enough to melt the solder. Now normally what that means is you wasn't touching one of them with your soldering iron, or you had oxide build up and you didn't get that good transfer between your soldering iron and the metal. But a cold solder joint is identified by these dips, right? You understand?
By the dipping on that.
Yeah, if it's dipping right here, then or if it's dipping like this. Now, of course, if you put a big old bulb over there, you got a solder eye over there, and if you put too much solder, it's going to dip anyway because it's got nowhere to go, right? You understand? That means you just got too much solder. So if you can't see this filleting where the solder bonds, where you can actually see that wedding, if you can't see that, then you don't know if you got a good joint. And the problem is it might work for a while, but you get that thing out there in the world where it goes under vibrations and stuff like that, eventually it's going to stop. So these are all bad joints. So the oxide really shows up here. It's hard to see on this one right here. And then of course, if it ever bubbles like this, it means you got too much solder or you don't know, right? You don't know. And that's the problem.
Those things are horrible.
What's that?
That pin thing you just showed.
That? No.
I hate that thing.
You just don't know how to use it. I'll show you how to use it. These a lot of people call these solder suckers. These are called solder vats. A lot of times, if you can, when you remove a part, and I'll show y'all this too, the best thing to do is to clip the leads. Then put your soldering on there and use those needle pliers to pull them out. But a lot of times you can't do that, or a lot of times you wouldn't believe how many times I've done this where I'm robbing off this part to fix this part, right? So when you remove the part from a thing, you don't want to damage the board. You don't want to damage the component that you're taking out. And so what you do is you use these solder vats, or you use solder wick. I think we got some solder wick over there. No, you won't. Not when you know how to use it. And I'll show you how to use it. A lot of people don't know how to use it, but you don't say it's so neat.